In today's episode, I speak to Sheila Holt about the thought process of Mavericks and how Socialised Mavericks avoid the state of confusion. We also discuss how Socialised Mavericks hire people smarter than themselves as a matter of course and how unafraid they are to do so. We also recognise that simplicity is complexity thought out. Listen to the rest of this fascinating conversation. Before we begin our conversation, here is a quick shout out to the pathologically curious. Check out the Maverick Paradox magazine. It's a digital magazine written by Mavericks for business owners and professionals. You can find the magazine at themaverickparadox.com. The magazine's aim is to provoke Maverick leadership everywhere. Welcome to the Maverick Paradox podcast, where we explore what it is to be a maverick and discover effective modes of leadership. I am Judith Germain, and my mission is to propel the maverick mindset into a world where character and integrity will ultimately have a higher premium than personality and bureaucracy. So thank you for joining me on this journey. If you would like to continue with me, then please subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or one of the other popular podcast platforms. And today, our guest is Sheila Holt. Hi, Sheila.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. What about you?
Oh, yes, I do my best to always be doing well. So today is like every other day, doing the best I can.
That's fantastic. Tell us more about you.
Oh, interesting question. When people ask me that, it always gets me to think and to wonder what people might want to know. Well, I definitely have never fitted into the molds that most other people fit into. What I mean by that is when I get an idea or when I want to do something, I go ahead and do it. And then afterwards, all through my life, from being an early adult, a young adult, people have said, well, how did you manage to do that? Or how did you manage to do the other? And I kind of look at people quizzically. I know what they're asking, but I kind of look at them quizzically. And I give them a cheeky answer. And my answer is always easily, if I have managed to do it, whatever it is, easily. And it's only in the last 6 or 7 years that I've realized that most people do something one way and I'm doing something in exactly the opposite way, with no knowledge that the majority of people are doing it in the first way. I just go ahead and do it in what seems to be the logical way to me, which is never ever following the herd. I have no idea what the herd are doing. And so I learned 6 or 7 years ago, I learned that that's called an outlier. So I lie outside the usual bell curve. So that's one thing about me. I'm full of energy, full of beans. I just love doing all sorts of things outside of business. And also, again, since being probably a teenager, actually, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I come from a family of entrepreneurs, and yet all of my family members never, ever taught me anything apart from go to school, get good grades, get a good education, get a great job. And so I did that and very quickly learned that me fitting into a great job was really getting rid of my life and my energy and my enthusiasm. So I made a break for freedom and ran for the hills at quite an early age.
Sounds to me that you're quite maverick. I define mavericks as willfully independent people. And that sounds like you.
That's an interesting definition of maverick, the word willfully. And I'm considering the word willfully and applying it to me, seeing if it does apply to me. Consciously, I am never willfully different. It's unconsciously. I just do things differently. And as the word suggests, unconsciously. So it took me a long time to become conscious that most of the rest of the population are doing things in one way, as I said earlier, and I'm naturally doing things in another way. So I'm not sure whether I'm willfully different. I never set out to be different. I just set out to be me. And it turns out that being me equals different.
Yeah, because there's two ways of looking at willful. You can look at willful as being like that toddler stamping their feet and having a bit of a tantrum. That's not what I mean. I mean in terms of willful is that you will do what you need to do because you want to do it, and you won't have reference to somebody else. I see willfulness as playful. It's almost like a smirk. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, huh, I'm just going to do it this way. It's a bit like you were saying, if most Mavericks, if they want to do something, say I've got an ambition to be this or I want to do that, you just go ahead and do it. You're not looking at what other people think, or if it's never been done before. You know, if you can see a way for it to be done, you will just go for that.
Yeah.
You know, so that's what I mean in terms of that willful. It's not willful and independent, it's willfully independent. So I will do what I need to do because I want to do it. And if you tell me it can't be done and I think it can be done, your opinion isn't going to stop me. Do you understand what I mean?
I do, and therefore I agree. I agree with that, and I love the way you've used the word playful and attached it to willfulness, because I'm very playful, and I do play with people in a really positive way. I've got a cheeky sense of humour, and I'm cheeky with people, and I get away with it because I smile at them, and I can state the obvious in a really cheeky way, and people go, "Oh yeah, you're so right," whereas somebody else might state the same obvious fact in a very different way, and the other person, the receiving person, will go, no, that's never me. So yeah, I am playful.
Yeah, I was just looking at your company values, and they are exactly what a socialised maverick would adhere to. So you've got approachable and friendly, good service. Socialised Mavericks is all about execution, making sure it works, and not harming people. Doing the right thing, that is like, if you got hold of a socialised maverick and cut them down the middle, it would be like, do the right thing all the way. It'd be like, work for the greater good, would be right through it. Lifelong relationships, socialised Mavericks are very networked, really good networks of engaged people. Trust and reliability, again, that's right there with the integrity and simplicity and clarity. It's like one of the things that socialised Mavericks do. They take something that's really complex and they re-narrate it, translate it for others to understand. So just looking at your values, I can see that you're definitely down that socialised Maverick route, which is kind of cool.
I love that. I've learned something about myself today. That's fabulous.
Yeah. So one of the things in my first book, I called The Maverick Paradox, The Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders, kind of go through that kind of blueprint on Mavericks and what makes them successful and how they utilize power. So you might want to check that out and have a look at that. But one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was Danielle, when she was talking to me about you coming onto the podcast, she says, "Oh, you're like Sheila," because she debunks many stereotypes and considers herself a real disruptor. So I'd be curious about what that means.
Okay. So let me think about this. I'm going to answer it in a different way, and I'm going to say that I like to know what people's strengths are, and I also like to know what their weaknesses are, because I love within my team, I love my team members to be working within their area of strength and to be working in ways that make them really successful. And I also know my own strengths and I know my own weaknesses. So within my team, I've brought in people who have strengths which are actually my weaknesses. And so one of the ways that I guess that I've debunked a stereotype of a managing director, for example, is that I'm very open about what my weaknesses are, and I'm very good and very willing and do bring in people that are far better at doing something than I am. So their strength is my weakness, and I'm very open about that. And that's debunking a stereotype that a managing director is always the one that knows the answers, is the one that knows best. Because as managing director of Sapphire Lending, I like to have a team that are really in their own flow. And then I like to have business partners who are way better than me. So in terms of the three of us, so I have two business partners, so the three of us, I am the weaker of the three of us. And that's the way I always like it to be. So within any setup, as long as I have people surrounding me who are far better at doing what I want to do, then I'm happy. So I'm often saying to my business partners, if I ever overtake you guys, then you're out. So I expect them to keep learning as I keep learning. So I'm coming up to where they are because they've done what I am wanting to do and I'm learning to do. And so we all move up together. So that's another way of debunking stereotypes. That's the way I want to answer that, Jude.
That's cool, and that's totally Maverick, so that's totally okay. But what interests me there is something that I've written about in my book about how Mavericks are not afraid of being surrounded by people that are better than them, and they will hire people because the Maverick leader is not afraid of other people's competence. They are sure of who they are and what they stand for and what they bring. Does that make sense?
Total sense.
I remember working somewhere and the MD asked me a question and I didn't have the answer. And they said, what's happening X, whatever it was. And I said, I don't know, you'll need to ask this person who was one of my team members. And I said, you're in charge, how come you don't know? And I said, you really want me to know everything? Because if I knew everything, then you're limited to what I know. I said, but I can tell you this, that the person who's dealing with this issue, she knows when to ask when she gets stuck. She knows to ask before she gets seriously stuck. She knows at what points are important to check, and or which points continue. So therefore, she's growing and developing into the role, and I'm comfortable that this area is safe in her hands because she knows at what point to say, well, I'm a bit concerned because it's going in this direction or it's not moving fast enough. I said, that's leadership. But he was really kind of confused because he didn't get it. And interestingly enough, as that company grew, and they were kind of one of those companies that are kind of straddling art and tech. And then when the tech changed, they hired a really brilliant guy, and he was paid a lot of money, and he was the best in the country. And they loved that. But over time, as his reputation grew, they got jealous because the MD and the other directors that owned the company couldn't do this new tech stuff. So they really kind of held him back. So he had all these great ideas and he was moving the company. He was hired to have great ideas and move the company forward. But he was so successful at it, and he never wanted to leave because that company was the best in Europe. So he didn't want to go anywhere else, but they just couldn't handle the fact that he was that good, and he was now doing stuff that they couldn't really understand. So they just pushed him down so much. In the end, he did leave because it was ridiculous how they were treating him, and it was from a Maverick perspective, it made no sense. And the company did go downhill afterwards because they just got talent that they grew, and then they just went, "You're better than me now," and they just couldn't handle it.
Yeah, I get that. I have never had it in my own life. I get what you're saying. It's a great example. I often think about Steve Jobs, obviously Steve Jobs and Apple, and using the term maverick, how maverick he was. And one of the things that over my adult life, I have strived to get people to make things simple when they're explaining things to me. And many, many times when I phoned up call centres, either on a business from a business perspective or a personal perspective, and I've asked a question of the operator, and I've been given an answer that I have no idea what that means. And when I've said, please, will you make it simple? I used to say, explain it as if you were talking to a 3-year-old. And consistently, the answer I would be given was, by the operator, I wouldn't insult your intelligence to me. I wouldn't insult your intelligence. And it took me a long time to realise that actually what that operator was saying in a roundabout way was, I don't understand the system. I can't explain it to you.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
Because if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it, is it? Because you're just a repeat. Oh gosh, you're like my twin. I can certainly see that with, especially in call centres, and then you have to ask questions. Then you kind of go into coaching mode, don't you? So you ask questions. So let me understand. If you're saying this is happening and this is the consequence, what you're really saying is this. And then you hear them go, yeah, that's why it doesn't work. So what's the solution? And they're like, oh, hang on a second. And then you almost have to kind of, even though you don't know, you kind of have to reason out the possibilities to give it to them to figure, so they can then use their actual expert knowledge to solve the problem. Do you see that?
Oh, I see that. I never do that. Oh, no. I have a different approach. So my own personal system is that I will phone up a second time, the call centre, a different day, a different time of the day. So invariably, almost 99.999 recurring, I will have a different operator. And I'll ask my question in lots of different ways. And I'm waiting for the answer. And the answer will be completely different from the first operator. And I'll say, please, will you explain it in a very simple way, as if you were talking to a 3-year-old? And they get more complicated. And then the third time, 3 strikes and you're out is my motto. So the third time, again, different day, different time, same call centre, I will phone up, get a third operator, I'll ask the same question, and I'll invariably have a third answer. That's when I ask to speak to a manager. And usually I get a fourth answer, and that's when I explain to the manager there's a massive training need. So I never spend my time actually teasing and coaching out of the operators. That's for the company to do.
Yeah, it's so funny. You are way patient to me, because my view is because if the person on the other side is genuinely trying to help and you can hear that, then you can work with it. But if someone's doing the system says no business, so there's no point in any conversation at all. As you say, you just either ring off or whatever. But one of the questions I tend to ask the operators, if there's been a problem or something like that, which I don't seem to get anywhere with the system says no, is, do you have in your ability to say yes to me? And if they say no, I don't. Because afterwards, they talk round it. I go, no, seriously, are you able to say yes? And if they say no, I say, well, it's no point in me getting angry with you. So you need to put me through to somebody who can say yes. And that often, and that just cuts it all down. It's like saying, if you're unable to say yes, and I think you need to be saying yes, I'm not going to argue with you. It's just going to make your day miserable, because I'm not going away. So you've given me someone who has the power, who can say yes and no. That's the person I need to speak to.
Yeah, I like that. I very much like that. For years and years and years, I have really worked on having people explain things simply. And within the world of finance, for me, within the world of finance, things are so complicated.
Yeah.
And what I've learned, and I'm going back to Steve Jobs and his simple stick. When we read about Steve Jobs in many books about how he thinks, those that have written the books talk about Steve Jobs metaphorically hitting people with the simple stick. And all that is when his team, his senior management team, used to go to Steve Jobs with a new idea for Apple, he would listen, and if it was still in that complex phase, he would say, I'm just hitting you with the simple stick. Go away, simplify it, then bring it back. And it was years before I learned and read about Steve Jobs. And yet all of my life, I have been, particularly in finance, I've been saying to people, make it simple. So metaphorically, hitting people with the simple stick. And simplicity is the result of complexity being thought through.
Oh,
so it actually...
Are you reading my mind? Every time you're speaking, I'm like, that means this, and then you come out and say it. It's so funny.
You're right, we are twins. And actually, most systems in most businesses and in life, most systems have people that have designed the systems and the processes have got it to a stage within that complexity where it works, and they have failed to push through. And it's the pushing through that web of complexity to bring out, oh, this is the core, this is the simplicity of it. You do this, you do that, you do the other, and job done. And it takes a special person, I realise, to push through that complexity, to push through that confusion. Another thing I always say to people is, we never live if we're healthy and well, mentally and physically. We may get into a state of confusion because we have all these facts and all this information coming into our brains. And at any one particular point, we can be very confused because all of this new information is coming in. And yet, as long as we're well and healthy, we don't live long term in that state of confusion. Confusion leads to clarity as long as we keep working through the facts, through the figures and all that new information. At some point, we will get clarity. And clarity, to me, is simplicity. When we're very, very clear about something, it's simple.
I think that is just so 100%. I mean, when I work with my SME clients and we look at business proposition, I'm always trying to distill down what they do into a very simplistic form, because I think people feel that if it's got lots of words in it or big words in it, then that shows that you're clever. I mean, I don't think it's like a conscious thing. I think it's a subconscious thing that if I can say, if I can use some sort of elongated word or some, rather than why I say confused when I can say something else, conflated, or something else, and it's like, but that's not how it works, and it's too difficult. I mean, there's a reason why newspapers, depending on which newspaper you buy, hit the age 7, age 12, or age 18, reading ability, because they know that people pick up things when it's simple.
Yes, absolutely. Inside Sapphire Lending, my business, we talk internally about the Sheila test. Mm-hmm. And so it's totally accepted inside Sapphire Lending that clients only become clients if they pass the Sheila test. And you can probably guess what part of the Sheila test is. It's about the simplicity. Do I understand what you, potential client, are saying? Do I understand how you're communicating? So if there's a mismatch in our communication from them to me or me to them, then there is a mismatch, which will mean within our working relationship, there will be a mismatch. So the Sheila test is always about, are you, potential client, communicating in whatever way you choose in a form and a way that I, Sheila, can actually understand? Is it simple enough? And quite a lot of my team bring things to me and say, would you just run your eye over this and see if you get it? And the see if you get it is it simple enough?
You know what, I think that is one of the, I'm at the moment writing book 2, and that's one of the concepts that I have in it, which is that Mavericks really not only just see, I think it's like you just see the simpleness, in the complex, you see the pattern and you just go, oh, okay, I've now read 300 pages of data, but what it really says is this 2 sentences, and I think the ability of a maverick to translate that to others is one of the key strengths. You take all of that nonsense and you go, oh, it just means this. And then people can get on board with that, can't they? They can run with it. And I think maybe it's because mavericks think harder and deeper on things and are pathologically curious. So you constantly, it is a pathology. It's like, so, you walk through the world going, I wonder what would happen if, constantly. So that, so your brain's always working on different permutations of stuff, It's a bit like, I don't know, you watch an eclipse and then you think, wonder what would happen if the sun didn't come back out again. Most people would go, why are you thinking such stupid? It's just like, I don't know. Not thought about it before, so I'm going to have a think about that now.
Yeah. I certainly agree with the thinking deeply. So part of my character is playful and fun, as we've talked about. And the other, we all have many facets to our characters. Another facet to my character is deep thinking. And I remember many, many years ago, I was at a party with some of my friends, and we were at a party where I didn't know the majority of people. And I was in my playful mode and just having a great time. And somebody said to one of my friends about me and said, oh, Sheila's like really playful and joyful and enjoying herself. And I want to have a deep conversation, so I'm going to go and talk to someone else. And my friend almost spat out her drink and said, I'd go and talk to Sheila if I were you. She could certainly think deeply.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. It's almost as if I think a socialized maverick is very self-aware, and they recognise the coats that they put on. Do you know what I mean? Because it's almost like I think I wrote something like in the first book, something like, I imagine the maverick standing there smirking with a playful smile on their lips, and it's that kind of like, they see life as a game, but a pleasant game. It's just like, what now?
Exactly. The what now? Looking around innocently, because we are I certainly am innocent. Looking around innocently, going, like, I don't get that. What now? And also, from my own perspective, I've always said it or called it like it is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I come from the north, although I no longer live in the north. So my education and upbringing was in the northwest. And northwesterners, by nature and nurture, who knows, probably nurture, are very direct, are very straight. We call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
And I've lived in the Midlands longer than I lived in the Northwest. However, I still have, and this is my nature as well as my the nurturing I had, I have always called a spade. And so the Midlanders, many years ago when I moved to the Midlands, kind of silently went, oh, she's very direct, and he's going in, take breath. And I've always felt that I've had to wait for Britain to catch up with who I am. I've waited and waited and waited for the UK to, this is how I've been thinking a lot of my life, for the UK to give up this stiff upper lip and just accept me for who I am and how I am. And now the UK does.
You know what I think it is? It made me think when you were saying that, there's that, because I think all mavericks are pretty blunt and direct, and socialized mavericks learn in their journey to become more tactful rather than tactless. I think we're all kind of born tactless, and then we kind of choose to learn to be more tactful. But I think it's that kind of tightrope between the need to be honest and the need to have integrity and the need not to harm people. And I think it's that kind of journey between learning how to balance those three aims. Do you see what I mean? So you start off with, I just want to tell the truth. This is the truth. And, if I don't tell the truth, then who am I? If I don't reckon, if I'm not someone who's a truth sayer, I don't know who I am, so therefore I'm going to just tell you bluntly, this is just the way it is. And then learning that actually that method of communication doesn't work for the other person and they can't hear what you're saying. So you need to find another way. And it's that struggle between, but I don't want to lose my ability to tell the truth in my ability to not, for you to hear. So it's that kind of, do you know what I mean? It's like, how do I get those three things working?
Yes, I do know exactly what you mean. And it's taken me a lifetime to balance those three things and have them working. Absolutely. And I found that by using my cheeky self, as I said earlier on, I can say anything to anybody and they take it, and I'll get them laughing at themselves and at their own absurd behaviour. And I'll get them saying, if it is absurd, how absurd their behaviour has been, because I'm using cheek to bring together the honesty. I have integrity and non-harming of people. And it's taken me a lot of adult years to work out the harmony between my honesty, my integrity, saying it like it is and calling people out without harming them. And when I was younger, a lot of people used to kind of be scared of my big energy. And so I always attempted to dampen down my energy and my drive and my honesty and my calling it out. And I no longer do that because I've found ways to manage all of that and package it, I guess, bundle it up so that people can enjoy swallowing what I have to say and go, if they agree with me, go, you know what, you're right. And I have so many people now saying to me, gosh, you are so right. And one of my friends quite a few years ago said, you're so right, you're dangerous.
Well, of course, Mavericks don't like appearing stupid. So if we make a definitive statement, we make it because we're sure we're right and we've checked and we've done the research. So if we say this is the way it is, it's because we know it is. And if we're not sure, we'll say, I'm not sure, but I feel that this is right. But you won't make a definitive statement unless you absolutely are certain.
Yeah, that's true. And I use gut feeling a lot. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm very open and straightforward and confident enough to say, I have no idea what you're talking about. I do not understand that. That makes no sense to me. And those are phrases that I will use a lot when it's true. I only use them when it's true. If I have no idea what someone's talking about, I'll say that makes no sense to me. What do you mean? Would you explain it in a different way? It goes back to the call centre examples. However, it's so in life. And I do use my instinct, my gut instinct tremendously.
Yeah.
And when someone has then made things simple enough and explained things so that I get it, then I will make a statement. And often I make no statement if people are unable to simplify things, or I'm unable to get it, or it is little to no interest to me, then I make no statement. There's no point in making a statement.
I'm only laughing because that is just so true. That is absolutely certain. It's almost like, I mean, I caught myself saying this week alone that this a colleague of mine done something, and exactly the whole what he said, it was too complicated, and it should be. But what they were doing, it should be quite simple, and kind of did a lot of the teasing out, and in the end say, you know what, this makes no sense, and actually sort of say that. And then I actually said, the only reason I'm telling you is because I care that you get this right. Because if I didn't care, I just wouldn't say anything, because there's no point. It's just exactly what you said. It's just like, there's no point in going through all that energy of dealing with someone's defensiveness and then you having to explain it and all this sort of stuff if you just don't care about the outcome or care about the individual. So as you said, you just don't say anything, because what's the point if you don't care enough? And I think sometimes that's misread, isn't it? So people think you're saying all this because you don't care. And it's the exact, and I think that's why sometimes Mavericks get really hurt in the process, because they care so much they are putting they're becoming vulnerable in an explanation to help you out, but people see that passion to help you out as maybe aggression, or that you don't care about the person or the outcome, when it's the complete opposite. I'm only getting this riled up because I care.
Yes, exactly. I totally agree. And in my younger years, when I got so passionate about things, people would say, "Why are you getting angry?"
Yeah, I am seriously not angry. You'd know if I was angry. This is not angry.
Yeah. And actually, at conferences in the old days, when we used to go to, not so old, when we used to go to conferences, live conferences, still now, just occasionally, people that don't know me and I don't know them, if I'm making a point as a member of the audience in a room, and I'm like getting really passionate about something, I have heard over a few years people going, "Calm down, Tiger, calm down, Tiger." And it's like, why are people telling me to calm down when all I'm doing is getting excited and passionate about a point?
And I've learned to say, this is really exciting, so that people get that, oh, I'm like practically jumping up and down because I'm just like, oh, my arms are going left, right, and hey, this is me excited. This is not me angry. But, and I think sometimes that Mavericks have such passion that, especially Socialised Mavericks, I think you hold back a lot of that in a way. But then when you get really excited, it's just like, it's almost like a hose. It's full force. Whoa. Or you hear an argument that you're so interested in, and you're like, oh, so what about this? And what about this? Or I don't agree with this. And it's not because you're not passionate and being proved right. You're just, let me look at this from all angles. So I'm going to play a part which is not my opinion. From what you said, I agree with you, but let me think of it from a position I don't agree with you, so I can test how strong your argument is. So I'm going to ask you questions that infer the opposite, because I am testing out your argument and how I feel about it. So I'm playing the devil's advocate at this point. And I found that when I do that, I have to telegraph that I have to say. So let me just tell you, because otherwise people are like, or when you suddenly go, oh, I agree, you suddenly go, yeah, that's a sound argument, I agree with that. And then you switch with, I totally agree. People are like confused. It's like, but you was arguing passionately the opposite. It's like, no, I wasn't arguing about it. I was just testing the argument, which is different.
And that's something I rarely do, actually. I rarely test the argument. I rarely put the opposite viewpoint. I've got my hands my palms facing the ceiling right now, so I'm kind of shrugging my shoulders. It's like, no, I rarely do that.
Oh, that's interesting. Why do you think that is? Is it because, why is that? Is there just no need for you to test it?
Great question. And your suggested kind of answer is there no need for me to test it, I think goes a long way to answer it from my perspective. Like if someone's making a point, then, and I listen to the arguments for the point, then I'm either going to agree with it or disagree with it. And I'll ask questions about the point. Can you explain this? How would that work? Blah, blah, blah. And then I make my own decision. As people have often said, I always know what I want. And in my life, my rule to myself or for myself is if I'm unsure, then unsure equals no. So I know what I want. If I'm unsure, so in the middle, unsure equals no. And sometimes it's just a plain no, this is nothing to do with what I want. So unsure equals no for me, and that always works out. So if I agree with a point, or I'm learning, someone's making a great point which I've never ever thought about, then I'll ask questions about it, as I'm doing now, and I'll think it through, and then I'll come to a conclusion. I guess for me it's about also I tend not to waste mental energy on an opposite viewpoint, which I have no intention of agreeing with.
No, that does make sense, and I see a lot of analogy there. And I guess so. As he was talking, I was thinking through the circumstances, and I suppose my default is similar to yours, but the difference is often I'm in a situation of teacher. So I'm either. So it's in everyone's interest to ensure that the thought that's being presented is one that stands up to argument. So it's almost a coaching perspective. Do you see what I mean? So let's make sure that this has rigor, because I know it hasn't got rigor. So let's make sure it has rigor. Do you see what I mean? So I suppose if I took myself outside of a teaching environment to say something personally, then I would agree. If I've already made up my mind, and there's no, if unsure equals no, is definitely something I can get on board with, because unsure means my gut isn't convinced yet.
Yeah.
And if my gut doesn't say it's good, unsure equals no. So I totally get that. I think it's probably, and that's what I think is so interesting, how these things interact, because it really depends on the environment and the context you're in and what the end goal is, isn't it?
It does, absolutely. And the environment is, for me, the environment, and the environment includes the people.
Yes.
That are inside that physical or outside in that physical environment. So sometimes, for me, environments can be very spiritual, or so the physical and geographical environments can be really spiritual and free-flowing, or they sometimes can be really heavy energy from the walls of a building or from the buildings around if you're outside. And that also dictates how much energy I want to put out, how long I want to be there, how open I want to be mentally and energetically. If I'm in an environment, the physical environment, which is poor and bad for me, then I want to get out of that environment.
Yeah, so
And the same with if I'm in an environment, as in with people who really are just thinking the opposite, acting the opposite, behaving in ways that I have no relationship with, then again I want to get out of that environment.
It's a case of what's worthwhile. The internet's a bit like that, isn't it? So sometimes you almost get dragged into having a conversation, and then you go, you know what, there's no value, of me spending time in this conversation. So no, I'm not even going to, this is clearly, from my perspective, this is clearly a nonsensical point, or it's based on a polarized position, and we see so many polarized positions on the internet, and you think, what's the value of me entering that conversation, other than the fact that it drains my energy and I'll be sucked into a conversation that might take days to resolve.
Yes.
People I have no relationship with. So the only reason you'd be doing it would be because you believe you're right, and that's not a good enough reason to expend all that much energy.
Exactly. And actually, just listening to exactly what you're saying and thinking it through, I personally, I don't have to be right.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
I don't have to be right. I'm not here to prove to anyone that I'm right. Because when someone is right only exists because wrong exists. So it's a seesaw. One end is right, one end is wrong. And if you take away wrong, there is no right. And that's how I think about life. I don't have to be right, and I've no intent. I've no intention of proving other people wrong. So very often I have no opinion on things, and sometimes people try and get into some discussion stroke argument, psychological argument about why don't you have an opinion. Well, I just don't have an opinion. It's okay for people to think like this and other people to think like that. And it's fine for people like me to have no opinion. So,
or have an opinion you don't want to share.
I have less and less opinions. I've worked on my self-development all my life, and you mentioned earlier that us Mavericks are very self-aware, and I am very self-aware, and there is no need for me to have an opinion, because the way I think about opinions is if someone has an opinion, then they are going to defend it to the hilt. And opinions are like belly buttons. So most people, virtually all people, have a belly button. So most people have an opinion on something, which puts them in a corner of right or wrong. And I want to be right and choose to be, in most cases, right in the middle of that seesaw on the balance point, where I have no opinion. This is what's happening, and some people agree with it, and other people disagree with it. And it's fine by me. I don't need to get involved in that.
That's so interesting, because I'm thinking about that, and I'm trying to see where I fit in that, and I can see what you're saying, because there are times where you just go, I don't have an opinion, but I was trying to think about what does that mean, and I think it means for me, I don't care enough to have an opinion. You know, like sometimes like there's an argument that's happening, and you're like, you know, I don't really care, so I'm not going to waste energy to even think through what I think. I just you know, it's almost for me, maybe it's like, how much do I care about this thing to expend the energy to opine about it? Or sometimes you have an opinion, or sometimes I have an opinion, but it's not an opinion that I particularly want to fight about. So, you know, that's just for me. Yeah, I don't agree. You know, blah, 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 I don't agree, but I'm not entering into this conversation because I don't care enough. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know whether it's kind of, I'm just kind of thinking about how that plays out. And I'm just wondering whether it's, for me, it's a sense of, it's that whole, it's almost like a complicated equation that happens in a split second between I care about this, or this is important to fight over, this isn't, you know, it's kind of like, meh. Or actually I have an opinion, but it's not worthy of my effort to discuss it, because it's just not relevant. I'm going to think about this more.
It's not, perhaps it's not worthy of my energy to share it. It's not worth, my opinion is not worth putting energy behind it to share it. That's occasionally, if I do have an opinion on something, then, and I'm unwilling or just nonplussed really, and end up without sharing it, it's often because, well, why would I put my energy behind my opinion? It's only my opinion. And that's something that lives in my head. It's only my opinion.
Yeah.
That never means to say it's right. And I know that occasionally I have, and when I was younger, I had lots of opinions. So I worked on myself very much to give up opinions about most things. And occasionally, if I have an opinion on something and I share it, I see what happens with, and I share it with passion, I see what happens with other people and their responses, and they start to defend their own opinion. So this becomes the right versus wrong debate again. And so what I will say is, this is only my opinion. And opinions are like belly buttons. We've all got one. It's just my opinion. Who's to say that my opinion is right? Who's to say my opinion is wrong? And that gets people thinking. So for me, I hold very little store about having an opinion for myself, because there's a link in my own mind between opinion and ego. So to have an opinion and to staunchly defend that our opinion is the right opinion, that begins to get into the area of ego.
Yes, I can see that.
And the more we defend our opinion, the more we stand in the right corner. My opinion is right. That pushes someone else to be wrong. So it's a win-lose situation, and it's an ego situation. And egos never do anybody any good. And so I came from that perspective when I worked on myself in terms of self-development, to give up having opinions on most everything, which means for me to give up having an ego. It doesn't matter if I'm wrong, and it doesn't matter if I'm right. Who cares? The only person that would care if I'm wrong or if I'm right is me. And I don't mind. I'm big enough and old enough and wise enough to put my hand up and go, you know what? I'm totally wrong about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally, I can see that, because I'm just playing through what you were saying, and for me, I get to the same place, but not with the same reasoning. And the place I get to is, I'm not interested in ego to ego conversations, because when you get to that point, you're no longer listening. So all rational facts disappear, and you lose your objectivity when you speak from ego. So if you get to the point where my ego says I have to be right, then that's not a position I want to be in. It's not, for me, it's not the same as saying I have an opinion that I'm right, because even if I state that opinion that I'm right, I'm still open to be wrong. Do you see what I mean? So, but ego isn't involved in it. So I get to the same place where you are, but probably in a different direction. I'm not interested in two egos having a go, because that's a closed loop discussion with no learning, and it's just pointless.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, this has been really interesting, actually.
It's been absolutely fascinating and interesting from my perspective, learning more about myself, and I am already very self-aware, learning more about myself from this discussion and from things you're saying, and for me thinking them through and how I interpret things and do things. And actually learning that I am a socialized maverick. I had no idea I was.
Well, I have learned greatly from, I've got notes everywhere, a close loop discussion. I've never thought of that before. That's come generated from our conversation. There's much for me to unpick and play with. So thank you for evoking my curiosity even more.
You are very welcome.
I think this is probably a good place to stop. However, is there something you had wished I had asked you? Because if there is, then please tell me now.
Oh, great question. Ooh. Great question. My silence means I'm thinking. Probably just to let people know how they can find out more about me and find out more about my company, Sapphire Lending, which of course is via my website, and there are many articles on both Sapphire Lending LinkedIn and Sheila Holt LinkedIn. So sapphirelending.com, Sheila Holt LinkedIn. There are articles where I have written short articles, and I've also written some tip sheets, if you like, almost distilling some of my thoughts, and some of my thoughts can be challenging, are written to be challenging as tips, and are written to support and help people as well.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Would you come back again and talk about something else?
Oh, yes, I will. Yes, please. This is me excited. Yes, please.
How cool is that? Thank you so much, Sheila.
You are very welcome. Thank you for our great conversation. It's revved me up for the next 2 years.
Brilliant. Thank you once again for tuning into the Maverick Paradox podcast. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my conversation with Sheila as much as I enjoyed having it. If you are pathologically curious and would love to find out more about the Maverick Paradox, then please subscribe to this podcast on one of the popular podcast platforms. Alternatively, you could explore our resources on Mavericks at maverickparadox.com, or read the Maverick Paradox magazine. We publish frequently each week. If you subscribe, you will get our monthly newsletter. And let's not forget, my book, The Maverick Paradox, The Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders. For those that love a good discussion, you could apply to join our exclusive Facebook group. And finally, if you would like to work with us or just interested in finding out more about the Maverick at work, check out our website maverickparadox.co.uk.